So I'm guessing there's nobody in this room who doesn't know who Dinesh is, but I'll do it anyway. Dinesh is one of the most influential conservative commentator, a successful writer and filmmaker who has taught conservatives not just to be right, but also to be effective. And that is an asset that we really need. He combines intellectual insight with the talent of a perceptive journalist for the hotspot of every single discussion, it seems, Dinesh. And I have to tell you, I was going to mention also your films, which we'll discuss later, but in the dark hours of the Russian hoax, where we thought the deep state's going to swallow Donald Trump, you were a light in the dark, and I followed you religiously, so I'm happy to be on this stage with you. Dinesh D'souza. In preparation for this talk, I couldn't fail to notice that Wikipedia is not in love with you.
I am described as a conspiracy theorist, which, from a certain angle, I think I'll take as a compliment. But no, this Wikipedia is a good example of they masquerade as a kind of neutral source of information, of biographical information, but their editors are basically like hitmen.
Yeah,
and you got to just look at it in that context.
It's a propaganda arm, very clearly. So they called me a Nazi and a baby hater or something. So we're on the same. I mean, not at your. I'm on the Hebrew Wikipedia, so it's not as conspicuous. I thought we would open, since there's been discussion here of anti-Semitism in general, by differentiating left anti-Semitism and right anti-Semitism. One version was that these are two almost symmetric, parallel phenomenon, and there are those who are saying it's an entirely different thing. How would you define them?
I think for me, the phenomenon of anti-Semitism is very tricky because it is conventionally defined as a hatred of the Jews for being Jews. I don't know how much that explains of a phenomenon. Let me give a thought experiment. If we were to take Israel, move it out of the region, and take another country, let's say India, and move it exactly into the spot where Israel is now.
It will be a little tight.
A little tight. But let's say you took a small group of Indians and you moved them here. And then there was all this, and the Indians were pro-American, and the Indians saw themselves as Western. And you get this torrent of Islamic hostility, all targeting this little India sitting right now in the Middle East. And the Indians said, we're being hated because we're Indian. Well, no. You're being hated because of your position. You're being hated because of your allies. You're being hated because of who you represent. You're being hated because of the inferiority complex of the people around you. So my point is, I think it is better to understand the phenomenon in this kind of larger context. What are the factors, by the way, some of them secular? I think Ambassador Huckabee touched on something that has not been a big theme in this conference, and that is I'll call it the transcendental motive of anti-Semitism, which I think actually deserves a little more explanation, which I'm happy to go into if you'll let me.
Please.
All right. There's a scene in Milton's Paradise Lost where Satan is observing for the first time Adam and Eve. And he notices that they're extremely beautiful, and he feels this hatred of them because of how beautiful they are. This is envy. And this is, in fact, I think, an important motive of anti-Semitism. It's maybe the most powerful secular motive that you can give. And yet, there's a second thing going on, and that is that Satan is in a campaign against God, but he can't overthrow God. And so he needs to go to plan B. And plan B is to find the things that God cares about and ruin them. So Adam and Eve have done nothing to Satan, but Satan's malice against them is a revenge scheme against the Creator himself. Apply this logic now to the Jews. There is the motive of envy, which I mentioned, but the Jews have also been God's chosen people, the mechanism by which you can say the moral law is transmitted to the world through the Jews. And if you believe that there is a world behind the world, and if you believe that there is a cosmic battle between good and evil that rages in the world, then it is not out of the question that what we are seeing in anti-Semitism is truly a kind of scheme by none other than the devil himself to torment the Jews as a form of revenge against God. This would also extend to some degree to the Christians for the same reason.
If we look at the implications of this view that you just outlined, if we graft it onto politics, your work obviously fits in the larger picture of the struggle between progressive, as if I can use John Fonte's terms, transnational progressive elites and democratic sovereign nation states, and China in the background. And Israel is a part of that puzzle. In your work, Israel, it's not an isolated issue. It is part of that larger struggle between two grand narratives.
Yes. I wrote a book many years ago. This was shortly after 9/11. I was at the Hoover Institution as a scholar at the time. And the book generated a lot of controversy at Hoover because right after 9/11, the prevailing view on the right was that we were witnessing a clash of civilizations. Us against them, the West against the Islamic world, and scholars like Samuel Huntington, Bernard Lewis were part of all that. And the argument that I made was that no, because you can't speak so easily about us. We are divided in the West between a left and a right. And it is not out of the question that the left will seek to make allies with external enemies, in this case radical Islam. At the time that I first wrote about this, it seemed unbelievable because, of course, you have two groups that have completely different end goals and cannot easily inhabit each other's world. But they're united by common hatreds. Hatred of Jews, of Christians, of America, of Israel, of Western civilization. And so, if we are out of the picture, if we're defeated, and the so-called Red-Green Alliance is triumphant, then it will be the Reds against the Greens in a kind of apocalyptic scenario. But to me, this is why it makes complete sense for Jews and Christians to draw closer together. It makes complete sense for America and Israel to be close allies. And this is what makes the right-wing attacks on Israel, the right-wing attacks on the Jews, particularly disturbing and anomalous because far from being America first, they are manifestly against American interests and they are manifestly against MAGA.
As my friend Caroline Glick often says, pick the Americans who are against Israel and you'll find that generally they are against America in deed or in speech. I'm so sorry we don't have 10 minutes more, but I can't let you go before the next surprise of your career, and it's not the first one. And this one is a book about biblical archaeology that you're working on now.
Yes. I'm doing a book, and I'm also doing a series of videos for Prager University on the most important findings of biblical archaeology, which I discovered almost accidentally. I came to Israel for the first time in December of 2022. This is actually our fourth trip. But when I saw these things coming out of the ground, that are authenticating the Hebrew scriptures going back 4,000 years. The first thing that occurred to me was, why isn't this being shouted from the rooftops of every synagogue and every church? And there are actually interesting reasons for that. But it also seemed to me to be very powerful evidence establishing the presence of the Jews in their ancestral homeland. And this is one way you have legitimate title deeds to a country, right? In other words, you get legitimate title deeds to a country, in my opinion, only three ways. If you look at the way the maps of the world are drawn, one way you get a country is you've been there all along, or you were there first. Number two, you can get a country by some negotiation or some treaty. And the third way, conquest. And if you think about the maps of the world, they almost always have to check one of these boxes.
Americans can buy them, as Jefferson reminded us.
Well, America's in an awkward position because the American Indians were there first. Yeah. They are the original inhabitants. But the white man, you could say, got the land by conquest, right?
Yeah.
The beauty of Israel is Israel checks all the boxes. The Jews were here first. They've been here for 4,000 years. They got it by treaty from the UN after World War II. And the Jews have fought multiple wars, 1948, 1967, 1973, and held the land by conquest. So whichever box you want to check, it seems to me that in that sense, Israel has the firmest claim to this land as perhaps any other country on planet Earth.
Absolutely. When is the book out?
In October.
October.
And you know, another note about the biblical archaeology, and this is a point about how, ironically, I think we don't do enough to defend our own civilization, because Western civilization is based on two pillars, Athens and Jerusalem. This is quoting the philosopher Leo Strauss. Athens doesn't really need a defense, but Jerusalem does, because of the fact that the Bible doesn't prove things, it just declares them. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Who's speaking? Right? It's spoken in the third person, but only God was there. So who's recording this? The Bible invites a certain type of skepticism. So to me, the power of this biblical archaeology is that at the time when the world has become more secular, it's almost as if we're getting, it's almost like God is sending us a message, but this time not in the thunderous language of Moses or Abraham, but through the quiet whispers of stones.
Forensic evidence.
Yes, stone inscriptions, artifacts, writing on pottery, all this kind of stuff.
Dinesh D'souza, thank you very much for coming here and for all the work you do. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gadi Taub and Mr. Dinesh D'souza.